In this video, I talk about negative surprises that many people don't expect their first year of retirement. Coming up next on Holy Schmidt.
Holy Schmidt!
Over the last several weeks, we've had the opportunity to speak to several graduates of our course, Social Security Simplified. This group of people was there to help us take the beta version of the course from where it was to something that was truly exceptional. And along the way, we had the opportunity to discuss with these folks some of their own personal situations. What's fascinating about one-on-one discussions that you don't get when someone is making a comment in the comments section of a video or by email is that how truly vulnerable they become. And it's an honor when they tell you this information because it comes straight from the heart. One of the graduates was talking about how difficult they were finding it to transition into retirement. And in these conversations, some familiar themes started to appear. These are themes that showed themselves when I was having discussions with family and friends about their personal situation, not as Holy Schmidt, but as Jeff. When you have these conversations with people, you compartmentalize them. But when you start to see the conversations, you see the issues happening over and over again, we start to see patterns. And with patterns, you can help people who might be experiencing the same issues, but just haven't said out loud what those issues are. Maybe they don't even know them themselves. They just know that there's something that they feel uncomfortable with. And this is what this video is all about. So let's get into what these are. The first is claiming Social Security at the wrong time. Now, in my previous video, released just a couple of videos back, I talked about when claiming Social Security at age 62 actually makes some sense. Now, there are a lot of reasons to take Social Security at age 62, but I'll tell you one that isn't a good reason, and that is false information. Information that is presented out there, clickbait information that turns out to be false later. Yet people are afraid, and so they act on that information. It happens all the time. Now, how do I know this? Well, there was a survey done at the University of Michigan, and that survey was put into a model in 2024 households from the survey, and they determined from that information that 4% of people who took Social Security took it at the correct age. The balance of the people in the survey took it at the wrong age. Now, sometimes it was months, many times it was years off, but they took it at the wrong age for their specific situation. The fact is, many people spend more time planning their next vacation than they do planning out their Social Security, even though Social Security is the single most important financial asset for a lot of people when they go into retirement. Point number 2, the retiree doesn't know that they may be paying taxes on their Social Security. And the fact is, up to 85% of your Social Security payment is taxable. That doesn't mean that you'll pay 85% tax on your Social Security payment. Don't get me wrong. It just means that if you receive Social Security, depending on how much you earn and your specific financial situation, up to 85% of your Social Security payment can be considered ordinary income for taxing purposes. It didn't used to be that way. In fact, before 1983, Social Security wasn't taxable. But with the amendments to the Social Securities Act of 1983, up to 50% of someone's Social Security payment became taxable. And then in the 1993 amendments, up to 85% became taxable. Gang, the decisions around your Social Security are some of the most important decisions around your financial life. And there are many decisions you actually need to make with Social Security. If you're struggling to see how it all fits together, overwhelmed by negative and sometimes contradictory news, don't give up and just do what a friend does because their financial situation isn't yours, and this is a lifetime decision. I just released a course called Social Security Simplified to help you make the best decision for your Social Security. And as a thank you for the early movers in the course, I'm giving 50% off for the month of August. So if this is of interest to you, go to holyschmidt.com/Social Security, and you can learn more about Social Security Simplified. Point number 3, one of the biggest negative surprises for retirees is that Medicare does not cover all costs. Original Medicare doesn't cover things like long-term care, dental, vision, hearing, and most care outside of the United States. And Medicare Part D doesn't cover things like over-the-counter medications, vitamins, supplements, and drugs that are for cosmetic use. In other words, there's a lot to learn about Medicare and healthcare options in retirement. And as a thank you, we have a free report called Healthcare Options Retirement. If this is of interest to you, go to holyschmidt.com/free report, and you will be emailed the report instantly. As an added bonus, you'll be added to our list and get periodic updates on things that are important to retirees. Point number 4, discovering that you must withdraw from your retirement nest egg. Once you reach a certain age, there's something called required minimum distributions. RMDs, as they're called, exist because certain accounts like traditional 401ks and IRAs give you tax-free growth on your investments. And at some point, the IRS would like to collect on the taxes that are owed on those investments. So RMDs require you to withdraw once you reach a certain age and pay taxes on your withdrawals. At that age, you'll need to follow a schedule and start withdrawing periodic withdrawals from your retirement accounts, even if you don't need the money. Point 6, many people are forced into retirement against their will. According to the Urban Institute study, 56% of the workforce over 50 is pushed out of their roles and forced to leave their job. They don't do this voluntarily, they're forced to leave. Usually it comes through some form of a layoff, but ultimately it is a cost-cutting measure, and someone less expensive either takes their role or they eliminate the role altogether. Think about this for a moment. People who've given their lives to a company, 20, 30, even 40 years of their lives, are suddenly told that they need to leave, usually with a day's notice or less. Life happens, of course, but here's the knock-on effect. They usually say that they're fine, but oftentimes they're not fine. And if they step back and looked at it academically, all of the things that they had to deal with that were very frustrating to them are now gone. So they should be happy. But being shown the door is not the road to happiness, even if someone doesn't need the money to continue with retirement. My wife's what's called a transition coach, and she helps a lot of people go through this transition. The good news, though, is that after the initial shock wears out, most people eventually get to a point where they're actually pretty happy about the fact that they're not working for that company anymore. But it takes time. And they go through a lot of feelings before they get to that point. Anger, despair, suddenly being disconnected from their social network. All of these feelings need to be processed before they get to the point where they come out the other side. The silver lining, if there is a silver lining, is that 12 months out, most people that work through a transition plan are actually quite a bit happier. But they need to know that they're actually going through a transition, and if they don't, well, then they are stuck, at least until they come to the realizations that can be worked out quickly themselves. And over the years, she's talked about quite a few inspirational stories. The most common one is that those that are exited oftentimes find a job where they get paid more and they have more authority, more responsibility, and they're generally more happy. Others took the opportunity to reset their career and do the things that they should have done a long time ago, but they were afraid. She said the most common reaction is that people who've left their careers start to see the world as a kinder, gentler place, not a place where people are calculating and manipulative. In short, they're finally living their best lives, but it took time. The next negative point is that people discover that they can't spend the way that they used to spend when they were working. Of course, there are exceptions to this, and these are people who are generally extremely successful and saved quite a bit of money, or extremely frugal and saved quite a bit of money, lived way below their means. And so their lifestyle doesn't change much because they were always living a Spartan life. But it does span the gamut. In our retirement community outreach process, I distinctly remember one person who engaged in what I call retail therapy to make themselves feel better. When they retired and they had to cut that therapy off, they were going through withdrawals, actual physical withdrawals from spending, or spending withdrawals, I suppose. Their entire life, it was a mad rush to make money and spend, make money and spend. So when they stopped making money, well, they had to cut back on the spending. Unfortunately, retail therapy almost always entails spending more money than you should on big things, because the rush comes from the, I know I really shouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I can. And that is the recipe for disaster in retirement. So 2 things on this. The first is that this is something you need to get under control, or it is something you will regret. Not right away, maybe not even 12 months, but 24 months on, 36 months on, when you're spending a lot more than your investments are growing, then you will definitely want to hit the brakes. But it's better to hit the brakes now before you lose a portion of your nest egg. The second is an assumption that people make that isn't true, and that is if they're spending outsized amounts of money both on themselves and those that they care about, well, they have significance, not only in their own eyes, but in the eyes of others. But I can tell you, most people who care for you, if they love you, this won't be their primary driver of why they love you. In fact, I would say if they only love you because you spend a lot of money on them, well, you can complete the sentence. The next point is that they want to continue to work, but they can't find a job. Oftentimes when people retire, as I mentioned earlier, they retire because they get laid off. But they don't stay retired, or at least they don't want to stay retired, and so they actively look for another job. Some end up doing very well and they get a better job. Others can't find a job at all and they are forced into retirement against their will. Gang, these are my 7. I see these all of the time. But if there was a negative surprise that you experienced when you went into retirement and it's not on my list, go ahead and add it to the comments section below so that others can learn from your wisdom. If you like this video, make sure you click subscribe and turn on notifications so that you get alerted the next time I post a video. I post several times a week. Also, as a reminder, if you're struggling to figure out how Social Security fits together, check out my course, Social Security Simplified. To learn more, go to holyschmidt.com/social security. This is Jeff Schmidt, and I will see you in the next video.